Welcome to The Cauldron, a podcast hosted by Ed Bolden-Greer, the creator of Ravens Vail. In each episode, Ed will have free-flowing conversations about horror, life, culture, and personal growth. Expect to hear from storytellers, authors, horror experts, life gurus, thought leaders, and influencers. The Cauldron is a place where concoctions of a lot of ideas are brewed down to potions that are sometimes important and useful, sometimes eccentric and bizarre, but always just what you need. The Cauldron podcast may contain explicit language and thematic elements not suitable for all audiences. Listener discretion is advised.
Well, hey there, family. Welcome back to the Ravens Vail Cauldron podcast, where the whispers of wisdom echo and the warmth of our community gather around the mystical flames as we stoke the embers of curiosity. Here, in this sanctuary of sorcery and storytelling, as the cauldron simmers, we're here to brew up a concoction of topics that resonate with the soul and spark the imagination. I'm your host, Ed Bolden-Greer, and I'm joined by the brave conjurer of curiosity, my co-host, Jacob Garner, a.k.a. Frady Cat.
Hello, everyone. In today's episode of the Ravens Vail Cauldron podcast, we're not just peeking through the veil, we're tearing it apart to reveal the wonders that lie beyond. Join us as we embark on the mystical journey through the ages, where the ordinary meets the extraordinary, and the secrets of time travel unfold before us. Fasten your seatbelts, grab your spell books, and prepare to be transported to a world where every tick of the clock holds a new adventure.
Hey, Jacob, how you doing, man?
I'm doing fantastic. How are you?
Great. How's your week been?
Boring.
Boring?
Boring. No alcohol. Very little nicotine. No sugar.
Yeah, we don't use nicotine, so I didn't mention that one. But yeah, you're on a no nicotine June also.
Well, very reduced. Very
reduced.
Because I'm actually planning on quitting in July. So I've got a plan on how I'm doing that.
So have you been reducing this month so it's not going to be so hard on you?
Yeah, I talked to my therapist about it. So I went from 10 to 12 pouches. I mean, you remember.
Yeah.
I was just constantly having one in, 10 to 12 in a day. Now it's 4.
Okay, and when are you going to reduce down to 2?
That's for next week, which is the last week of June.
Yep.
Whenever this episode comes out.
Yep.
And then July, it'll be 1 a day. And then hopefully by the end of July, a little birthday present to myself at the beginning of August will be that I will be nicotine-free.
Yeah, we're going to have a big celebration for Jacob's. How old are you going to be, Jacob?
It doesn't matter.
Yeah, it does. How old are you going to be?
Same age as Zach, believe it or not, 29.
Yeah, same age as your twin,
Yeah.
29 years old. The last year of your youth.
Yeah. I'm actually thinking about, me and Zach were talking about it. We're thinking for our 30th birthday, it's not our idea, but we're thinking about having a funeral for our 20s. Everybody shows up dressed in black and we hold a eulogy.
Hey, did you hear where Thailand overwhelmingly voted to legalize same-sex marriage?
Yeah, I just woke up and saw that today, actually.
I think that's amazing.
Happy Pride Month,
Yeah,
bro.
happy Pride Month. Thailand will become the third place in Asia. The first was Taiwan and then Nepal, and now Thailand to have same-sex marriage.
And I don't know if you felt the same way, but when I read that headline, I thought, is it already not legal in Thailand?
No.
Because, drag is very integral in Thailand.
Right. Well, Thailand's very progressive.
Yeah, they are.
Very forward-thinking, but it's taken a while to get to this point, just like it does everywhere. So
I mean, it's crazy to think about, too, that the Philippines, right now they have a pretty right-wing government and have for, the last 10 years, but I also find it incredible to think that the Philippines hasn't legalized gay marriage. So,
right.
We're so fortunate to live in America during Pride Month, and we get to see our fellow, queers, everybody out in the street dancing, we're having a great time and everything like that, but it's still... We got a long way to go globally.
Yeah. Again, happy Pride Month.
Happy Pride Month, everybody.
We're excited. It's Pride Month. I just was watching some TikToks the other day, as I do.
Yeah.
And I saw a TikTok, and at first I thought, I'm just not into that. I'm not going to agree with that.
Mm.
And it was a creator who was talking about being trans
Yeah.
and how often people will leave the T out of the Alphabet Mafia's logo, you know.
Really? I didn't know
Yeah. Well, historically, gay men have not always been as supportive of the trans movement.
that. Oh, yeah.
You know? And so this individual, they were talking about how often the trans equality movement gets left out. And I so agree with that.
Yeah.
And then
I see it every day with my partners, man.
yeah, they were talking about how in their comments on their TikTok, how the message of love is love
Yeah.
was always put in there. But love is love. I'm just going by what they said on their TikTok, but the part I agreed with. At first, I wasn't agreeing because I think love is love, right? But they made a very good point. Love is love is about marriage equality,
Yeah.
okay? And it's about same-sex marriage.
Mm-hmm.
And it doesn't have anything to do with the trans movement
Hmm.
at all. And so I agree with that. It took a while for me to think about that, but I think for Pride Month, it's great to say love is love,
Yeah.
okay? And this is another point I agree with that creator. Love is love,
Yeah.
right? But just like people wanted to say all lives matter,
Oh, yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
You know?
Yeah.
um,
I see the point you're making.
we have to be able to say love is love and trans lives matter
Yeah.
as well. And that we in the queer community have to support trans people just like we do all the other alphabet,
Yeah.
right? And I think that I always have. I often feel very reluctant to use pronouns now, and I think that that's good. I'm self-aware to where I don't want to mispronoun someone.
Yeah. Misgender
Misgender someone. I even think it's more about pronouns than gender, because often where I have the most difficulty is when they don't specify a gender.
Oh, yeah.
And so I respect those people and want to make sure that I'm saying the right thing, you know? And so I constantly think about it so that I can make people feel more comfortable and make them aware that I see them.
Yeah.
And that they're important and that they matter and that their lives matter.
All of them, right? All lives. No, I'm joking. I will say, though, I do, from a laziness perspective, if I'm being 100% honest, I'd be okay if we drop a couple letters off because it's becoming a mouthful for me. No, I'm joking. How do you refer? Do you prefer to say LGBTQIA plus, or do you prefer? I prefer just to say queer.
It depends on the situation.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think so. As you know, I do some speaking.
Yeah.
When I'm speaking, I will use LGBTQIA plus in my speeches until it becomes repetitive.
Yeah.
Then I will say queer.
Yeah. But you get the baseline,
Right.
to be formal about
Right.
it, right? No, that's
And I also usually explain that just because I stop at plus, doesn't mean I'm excluding anyone from that.
Mhm.
And I know we joke about the LGBTQIA, B, C, D, E, F, G all the time because it is a mouthful.
It is, yeah.
It is. And so in common language, I will say queer,
Yeah.
And I think that is a word that I have reclaimed.
Yeah, of course. Yeah.
And I think that that's a word that has power
It does, yeah.
in my life. And so I'm very proud to use that word,
Mm-hmm.
And it's been a derogatory word of the past. So I now openly and proudly use that word when I'm talking about individuals. Now, here's the thing.
Yeah.
If you are not comfortable with that word, I try to be as respectful as possible.
Yeah.
So there's some stuff there that is a learning, I think there's a learning gap for all society because we've been so entrenched into the binary,
Yeah. Oh, God,
and,
yeah.
and I'm trying to become more gender neutral pronouns in everything I do,
Mhm.
especially writing,
Yeah.
Characters that I write are often gendered, probably noticed from the last episode, we've introduced a gay character. It wasn't overt in your face, but we've introduced a gay character, Petra, into the storyline.
Which, by the way, that last episode, check it out, guys. It was a banger. It was so good.
Thank you. The cast did such a phenomenal job on it. But to that point, I didn't write a queer character into the storyline. It was already planned out. I have pages and pages of who's going to be in the story.
Mm-hmm.
So it wasn't that I'm queer, so I'm writing a queer character.
No.
But I did hold off on writing it until Pride Month. That was purposeful.
That was intentional.
So, Jacob, before we get talking about time travel, or before you get to talking about time travel,
so excited.
Are you ready for the would you rather question?
Sure. Okay. You know I love these things. Come on.
Okay, here we go. Would you rather be stuck in a time loop, reliving the same day for a year, with the chance to perfect every moment of that day, okay? Or have a one-time use, so you got a golden ticket, one-time use time machine to go to any point in history and start a new life? I'll give you about 6 years to think about that one.
Cool. And I'm back. So I just time traveled. I think maybe. Oh, that's a really good one. I think I would pick the one-time use one. Although I do love the Bill Murray movie Groundhog Day.
Yeah.
That's immediately where my thought went with the first choice.
I was kind of thinking about how you would answer that, and I thought that you would go with the one-time use, and I'm pretty sure, I'm not going to say it on the air, but I'm pretty sure I know what mistake you wouldn't make.
Yeah.
I think that would be a good thing for you to do.
Yeah, same here.
I still think you'd be where you're at today.
Probably. I think so. All right, I got one for you. You ready? And this is actually another one, too. Another time travel question. Would you rather have the ability to correct one past mistake every year, or gain insights into one future event every year, but you don't have the ability to alter it?
Oh, God. So, gaining the insight, I can't stop whatever's happening.
Nope.
But I could do workarounds around it.
Think of it kind of like the weather. If it says it's 100% chance it's going to rain tomorrow, you can't stop that.
I can't stop the rain, but I know to take a rain jacket. Or
exactly.
Okay, so that's what I wanted to make sure. You know what? I don't have a lot of regrets in my life.
Besides hiring me.
No, that's not a regret. You have made me laugh every day, and not laugh at you. You have made me laugh every day that we have had the pleasure of working together. So, no, I'll go a step farther on that because I pick on you a lot. But
oh, you do?
But I think that in the past 3 years, I have seen you go from somebody who was beaten down, okay, and just unhappy, to today, I see somebody who enjoys every minute of life.
Oh, yeah.
And always has a smile on their face and is in therapy.
Yeah.
And is making good decisions. And what I want to say is that regardless of how much shit I give you, and that's not ever going to stop.
No, I know.
The fact that you pulled yourself out of homelessness without anybody's help and you did it all yourself, I just want to say that in itself is a story worthy of Pride Month, okay? So you know this already, but I need everybody else to know that I love you and I respect you, but I'm never going to stop picking on you. And you're still the shortest person I know.
That's not true. Come on.
Well, you're the shortest guy I know.
That's fair. I love you too, Ed.
We do have some staff members that are shorter than you, but they're all female.
Wait, bring up that bullshit you called me into your office for yesterday.
Which one? Oh,
you were ordering this thing off of Amazon.
Yeah. So everybody knows that I have this horror love of everything Halloween, and we're ordering some decorations for the house and maybe for a stage or two. And we found a witch. And, the podcast is all about witches. But so we found this witch, a crone, and I ordered it. And as I was reading the description, we were trying to figure out how tall it was going to be.
Yeah.
And it turns out it's going to be almost 6 foot tall, really, with the hat. Okay. So about 5'9". And the advertisement said life size. So I didn't have a choice. Life just would not have allowed me to move forward if I hadn't called Jacob in to inform him that at 5'5",
Yep.
you are not life size.
I'm not life size. He broke it to me like he had some horrible news to give me. What made it worse is that like 3 or 4 of my coworkers were in his office, and they were all playing along.
They were the ones putting me up to it.
Right.
I mean, not that I hadn't already thought of it, but anyway, yeah, Jacob's not life size.
I'm not.
We've decided he's toy size.
It's fair.
He likes to be called a toy.
By the way, Ed,
Yeah.
Happy Father's Day.
Thank you.
Yeah. I hope you had did you have a good Father's Day?
I did. I mean, we didn't really do anything, but
Sounds
yeah, it was a good Father's Day.
Well, to segue from that,
Yeah.
Are you ready for your dad joke today?
Yeah, I'm pretty sure this is going to be horrible.
On brand.
Yeah.
Okay. Why don't time travelers ever get hungry?
Okay.
Because they always go back 4 seconds. Get it? 4 seconds? FOUR? 4
Yeah,
seconds. They go
I
back
get it.
4 seconds.
Yeah.
That's a pretty good one.
That is. You're right on brand. That's for sure. Well, Jacob, today is all about time travel, as we've been saying.
Oh, yeah.
I know you've done your homework. I don't even have to ask because this was your idea.
Yes.
You wanted to throw this one into the schedule, and I said you could have it.
I fought for it.
So why don't you enlighten the good listeners
Mhm.
with your research, and I'll see how I feel about it.
Okay. Let me preface this by saying,
I think that word is preface.
let me preface this by
You're not professing it. You're prefacing.
Let me give a disclaimer about the time travel research. Let me just say that there is shockingly not a lot of information about time travel, like legit time travel. Okay.
Right. Because we don't know how to do it yet.
Yet. Eventually we might. But I will say that the research for this one was a tad bit spotty. I thought that it was going to be a lot easier than when I suggested it.
Mm-hmm.
We can still...
Do you remember what I said when you suggested it?
No, I don't. What'd you say?
I was like, that one's going to be a hard one.
Yeah, and you were definitely right. But I did my best, so...
Well, your best is all we can ask for.
It's all you can ask for. And here's what I found.
Okay.
Let me start
Hit me with it.
Let me start with what we do know about
Okay.
time travel in reality, right? So there is a phrase called time dilation. Are you familiar with this?
Yes.
Okay. So there's a guy, he was kind of smart. His name was Albert Einstein. Maybe you heard of him.
A time or two.
So he came up with a theory known as the theory of relativity. Now, this is quite possibly the most popular formula that's ever been written from pen to paper. Everybody probably knows the phrase E equals mc squared.
Do you know the time dilation formula, though?
What is that?
Y equals 1. I don't know.
Okay.
I looked it up when I heard you were going to talk about it, and
Yeah.
it's out into the stratosphere of physics that I don't understand. It took half of a board, so
So Einstein, I'm gonna give his definition, okay,
Yeah.
of time dilation, and then I wrote a layman's example so that we can conceptualize it. Okay. So time and motion are relative to each other.
Mhm.
So we understand currently that nothing can travel faster than the speed of light. Which, do you know what the speed of light approximately is? It's about 186,000 miles per second.
yeah.
Okay? I don't know what that is in the metric system. So the phenomenon known as time dilation is basically that time can speed up or slowed down relative to the observer, especially when approaching the speed of light. Now, I'll break it down, okay? Here is a simple analogy that's going to involve two fictitious people and the speed at which they experience life. Anybody that really wants to see this drawn out in a very entertaining way, watch the movie Interstellar. Fantastic movie.
Great movie.
Love it. So I want everybody listening to imagine that there are two friends. We got Alice and Bob, okay? So Alice stays on Earth while Bob is in a spaceship that moves extremely fast. We're going to ignore the fact that if we traveled close to the speed of light, we would literally turn into tomato paste and die instantly. We're going to assume that this spaceship has the ability to keep Bob alive, okay? Alice and Bob both have a watch, a mechanical watch on, and they are built identically. So for Alice, here on Earth, time passes normally. She sees Bob's spaceship moving super fast and assumes that Bob is also living life at the normal pace. However, Bob is moving significantly faster than Alice. So, due to the theory of time dilation, he experiences time a lot slower compared to Alice. To put it another way, okay? Alice, if she had the ability to look at Bob's watch, she will notice that Bob's watch is ticking slower than hers. If they were holding them side by side on a live stream, Alice's second hand is moving about 4 times faster for every 1 second than Bob's is, okay? But from Bob's perspective, he thinks time's just passing normally. He has no concept that it's going slower than his. But when he looks back at Alice's watch, he does notice, okay, wait, hers is ticking a lot quicker than mine. The difference happens because, according to Einstein's theory of relativity, the faster you move through space, the slower you move through time. So an easy way to think about it, if Bob travels for what he feels is 1 year on his fast spaceship, he might come back to Earth and find that many years have passed for Alice. Essentially, traveling at a high speed slows down your experience of time compared to those who are not moving as fast. So, long story short,
It's just like the Fae in Fairyland.
Yeah, like in Dungeons and Dragons, like 1 day in the Fae Kingdom.
Could be 20
years here.
Yeah.
But the interesting thing about this sort of time dilation is that neither party, whether the one that's moving really quickly or the one that's back here on Earth, notices that they're experiencing time slower. So something I think is really, really interesting is that this is something that's so crazy about Einstein. He did the math and was like, hold up, this actually is kind of possible. Now, the way that we finally had proof, and so he wrote this theory that it was possible, and then as we were doing the space race and we built the International Space Station, we now finally had concrete evidence. It's almost, the way that I could compare this using a sports analogy, Einstein stood at the bat, or at home plate with a baseball bat, and he pointed out into the upper decks and said, I'm going to crank out a home run. And then about 40 years later, he hit that home run, okay? So astronauts on the International Space Station are moving at about 17,500 miles per hour relative to the Earth. This high velocity, similar to the Bob and Alice analogy I used earlier, makes them experience time slower than people on Earth, okay? So there's also like a weaker gravitational pull on them too, because they're above the Earth. So one of the most famous experiments demonstrating this effect involved a atomic clock. Do you know what that is? So it's the most accurate measurement of time that we as human beings have come up with, okay?
Our time base.
Our time base, exactly right. So in 1971, I'm going to try to pronounce this, the Hafley-Keating experiment, and they were two scientists. They took 4 cesium beam atomic clocks, which we now understand at the time was the most accurate clock we could make, and they put them aboard commercial airliners flying around the world. They found that the clocks on the airplanes showed slightly less time had passed compared to identical clocks that they had made that remained stationary on the ground. And when we say that it was like slightly slower, we're talking like milliseconds slower. But if you increase like the experiment on a magnitude like times a million, it would equal, instead of milliseconds, days and years.
Right. So to add on to that, anytime the flight was going eastward,
Mm-hmm.
they lost time. And if they were going westward, they gained time.
Yeah.
That's amazing.
And we've found that if you look, so carbon dating is another really popular way that we can determine roughly an approximation of how old something is, okay? Now, we are carbon-based life forms, human beings are. And what they were able to find is that they would, like, take a sample of tissue from an astronaut, like just some skin or something like that. And then they would wait until the astronaut had spent like 2 years on the International Space Station. The moment that they landed, they would then take a sample of the same area of the skin and carbon date it. And what they found was that they aged slower on the International Space Station as opposed to the sample they took and kept here on Earth.
Right. Just a little brief thing about carbon dating. When we're looking at carbon dating, we're really looking at the half-life of carbon-14, right?
Yeah.
And so that means that we can only look at things that are 1,000 to 10,000 years old and accurately carbon date them. That doesn't mean we can't get the age of something else, because we can use other elements that we know have longer half-lives to date things that are older. That's how we know things that happened 1 million years ago.
Well, hey there, family. I'm Jordan Walker, the voice of Palmer Ashford here at the Ravens Vail podcast. At Ravens Vail, we love telling you our story. That's why I'm excited to tell you about Appalachian Horror Fest 2024. Appalachian Horror Fest 2024 is an evening of music and storytelling themed around the macabre. The event will take place on Saturday, October 12th, 2024 at Central Cinema in Knoxville, Tennessee from 5:30 until 9:30 p.m. Our hauntingly talented musicians will serenade you with the eerie tunes that echo through the misty Appalachian foothills. Gather round as our master storytellers weave their blood-curdling tales. Legends of restless spirits, vengeful ghosts, and ancient curses will dance in your imagination. Tickets are on sale now at AppalachianHorrorFest.com/tickets. Oh, storytellers, if your words can raise goosebumps and summon sleeping spirits, step into the spotlight. Submit your spine-chilling tale at AppalachianHorrorFest.com/storytellers. Appalachian Horror Fest, where nightmares come to life. We hope to see you there.
Something that I think is actually really cool to go off of measurable examples of time dilation is GPS satellites.
Oh, yeah.
Okay, so GPS satellites, for people who aren't aware, we use GPS every day. If you've used Apple Maps or Google Maps to find a restaurant or a bar to go to, right, that uses the GPS satellite system, the global positioning system, okay? So these satellites are orbiting the Earth at very high speeds, and again, similar to the International Space Station, are in a weaker gravitational field compared to the Earth's surface. Einstein's theory...
It's called a gravitational potential well.
Oh, okay, cool. So Einstein theorized that time, much like matter, is affected by gravity, which is something that's just a wild concept. When he came up with this, people were like, he's lost his damn mind. If some random person theorized this, they'd go, cool, man, here's $1, you know.
Go buy coffee.
Yeah, exactly, you know, whatever. But because he was so intelligent, it caused a lot of people to go, hold on, maybe there's something here. And what was nuts was that Einstein had the math to back it up. This wasn't just, I think it's this way. So anyway, go back to the GPS thing. The factors that are common with time dilation, high speeds and weaker gravitational fields, it caused the onboard clocks on these GPS satellites to tick slightly faster than clocks on Earth. It's to the point to where engineers have to account for this time difference. And it's about, this is a massive number, get ready, 38 microseconds per day.
10 nanoseconds.
Yeah. While this doesn't seem like a very big deal, when you're thinking about like a missile, okay, because a lot of aerospace engineering is used for weapons of war and military things, you definitely want your missile to have the most accurate information as it's flying towards its target. So they, even though it may not seem like a big deal to us, they actually have to account for it. And without the adjustments, GPS would actually be inaccurate by several kilometers each day. So we take it for granted how advanced the GPS positioning system on our phones actually are. The amount of math that goes into it is unbelievable.
I don't know. Last time I was in Atlanta, they changed some of the roads in downtown Atlanta to where they're all one way. And I needed to get to the other side of the block. And GPS kept telling me to turn the opposite way, go the wrong way down our one-way road. Maybe that was being affected by that global positioning in the well.
I bring up all of that to basically say we have measured that time dilation is a real factor of our natural law. And if you increase it on a scale, multiplying it by thousands of times, like I said earlier, you could effectively cause time travel, which is something that's really interesting to think about, okay? So there's a fun thing. If you were able to do that, let's assume that in the future, we've somehow figured out a way to travel close to the speed of light. Let's say somehow we find a way to break past the normal conventions that we find ourselves in, and we're able now to travel faster than the speed of light. In that theory, you could essentially time travel.
They proved that on Star Trek.
Star Trek right again, man. So,
to their credit, Star Trek looked at all the theories when they were writing stuff.
Oh, yeah.
You know?
The writers for Star Trek were, pun fully intended, ahead of their time, I guess you could say. So, I want the listeners, if they imagine about time travel, right? What about me? Can I time travel, right? Well, currently not right now, but to test this theory, Stephen Hawking, you may have heard of him, right? He did something that I thought was really funny. Did you hear about his time traveler party that he threw?
I heard something about it. If you remember Donna Funk, who was one of your mentors, Donna Funk was kind of enamored with Stephen Hawking and read all of his books and understood all that stuff. I, for a long time, said, I'm not sure that she's cut out to be a massage therapist because she mathed pretty well.
Really? I read his book, The Universe in a Nutshell.
Yep.
And then he released a second edition that was even more simplified and had bigger pictures. I've read that book probably 20 times. I probably understand a third of it.
I need the one written in crayon.
Yeah, I know, right? So here's some fun facts about the time traveler party, okay? The party was held on June 28th, 2009 at 12 noon, but Hawking announced it after, which I thought was kind of funny, right? The event was hosted at the University of Cambridge, specifically at the Gonville and Calais College. The invitations, along with the exact coordinates, were publicized after the event. Hawking published the invitation details in various ways, hoping that if time travel to the past were possible, future time travelers would come to his party. Hawking's aim was to conduct an empirical test to see if anybody would show up. And if you were a time traveler, Stephen Hawking's one of the brightest minds in human history, you would probably go to his party just to prove to him that his theories are correct, and so were Einstein's, right? But reportedly, and I say reportedly, nobody showed up and attended the party. So it was like a lighthearted yet very practical demonstration suggesting that backward time travel probably isn't possible, at least not in a manner that would allow people to visit the party. Now, there are some conspiracy theories.
Now, hold on just a second, because we're talking about time travel.
Yeah.
I need you to correct something you said. You said no one showed up.
Reported.
To our knowledge, no one has showed up. But I believe that time is not linear.
No.
Right?
Yeah.
We've talked about ghosts getting trapped, the energy signatures getting trapped and all that. So although we don't today know that anybody showed up, people from the future might time travel back to that period, thus not holding on to the prime directive of Star Trek about not interfering.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I don't know about all that.
There's some conspiracy theories.
I'm sure there are.
about this. Now, I'll go into those in just a second, but I'll talk about the aftermath and the interpretation of this. So this party has become a very famous anecdote illustrating, obviously, Hawkins' kind of tongue-in-cheek wit, because he was a funny man. Like, I don't know if you've read some of his interviews or read his books, but he's very tongue-in-cheek most of the time. But I think it was really cool because this is a very simple way of communicating to the world at large about a very complex scientific experiment that he was actually trying to do. It seems very simple on the surface, but underlying it was a very, very well thought out experiment. Now, while it didn't offer any definitive proof against the possibility of time travel, it definitely got us all questioning, is it possible? So Hawking himself in a later interview discussed the party and its implications in various public talkings and writings. And he used it really to underline the complexities and the paradoxes that kind of come with time travel. But I will say that there were some really fun conspiracy theories. Now, let's imagine that somebody did show up to Stephen Hawking's party. Do you think that the world at large would be able to handle that?
Here again, we don't know that people didn't show up.
Exactly. So there's a conspiracy theory that I found online that said that somebody did come back. Some rogue agent, maybe in a very, very far, like tens of thousands of years in the future. He randomly read about this account happening, and he decided to go back in time just to say, hey, Stephen, it was possible. It is possible. I'm from the year blah, 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 right? And Stephen Hawking understood the gravity, pun fully intended on that, of what had just happened. I think that if somebody did go back in time and then came to Stephen Hawking's party, he kept it to himself. Because the question immediately would come, and let's just use a horrible example. If we had the ability to time travel, right, why has nobody gone back in time and stopped somebody like an Adolf Hitler or Joseph Stalin from ever coming to power, right? And that it would cause, if we did have a proven example of time travel being possible, I think every government on Earth would throw every bit of funding into figuring out how we can do it and become the first one. It'd be like a space race on every steroid imaginable. And the implications of that are horrible because we like to think that naturally, if we had the ability to time travel, we'd go back and kill Hitler before, he took over Germany. But that's assuming that everybody that understands time travel and can harness the power wants to use it for good.
That's right.
Now, I personally
would not use it for good. I know.
Exactly.
I know.
Yeah.
That's why you have me, your moral conscience.
I mean, what do you think about that, Ed?
Well, I'm just going to be honest. I think that time travel is so fascinating. I think that as fascinating as it is, there are some things that perhaps we need to keep not everybody doing, And everybody's always talking about transparency. And in my life and in my business, I believe in transparency. But I don't want to know all the secrets that people know. You know, I find them fascinating, but I don't want to be put in a situation where I get to choose somebody else's fate.
Yeah.
Because I think we're human, and I think that humans have the innate potential to become power hungry.
Oh, yeah, it's in our nature.
I think that there are people who would not abuse that power, but I don't know that we can predict that.
Yeah.
So
you're touching on something that I think is a very common term that people use. I saw it in all the research that I did. I'm sure you're familiar with the butterfly effect.
Oh, yeah.
Right? So the butterfly effect, for some listeners who may not know what it could possibly mean, is the idea that even something that seems insignificant in the moment has a cascading effect on the events in the future. I want you guys to think about something, might be a little traumatic for some, but I want you guys to think about something like a car wreck, okay? If you've ever been in a car wreck, you've probably had the same thought that I've had, where I said, wow, if I had left my house 2 minutes earlier or 2 minutes later, I wouldn't have been in this car wreck. If I had decided to go the speed limit instead of speeding a little bit, I wouldn't have arrived at that point that then caused the car wreck. So if time travel is possible, doing something relatively minute may end up being the cause for something very significant to happen later. Let's use an example. Who's to say that there wasn't, in a different timeline, a person that was worse than Adolf Hitler?
That's true. I mean, there's lots of sci-fi movies, especially like in the Star Trek universe, episodes where they're trying to correct the timeline.
Yeah, and they sometimes make it worse.
And who's to say that you stopping whatever the traffic accident or whatever doesn't make it worse because that was the thing that was correcting the timeline.
Exactly.
You know, I do. You know, being a person of faith, I do have this feeling that that although we have free will in life, that there's a certain plan out there that's going to happen regardless. You know, I don't necessarily call it predestination, but I think that just like we're all born and we're all going to die, that the individual microorganisms, which we would be microorganisms living on the earth, that we don't really get to control the earth's fate.
Yeah.
You know, that's why, as concerned as I am about global warming and about pollution and stuff like that, I also know that our Earth is very self-correcting.
Yeah.
And we'll find a way to make sure that it sustains itself.
Yeah. Whether we're a part of it or not. Right?
Whether we're a part of it or not, yeah. And I think that it's kind of scary to think that one person could have enough power to go back in time or go into the future. So far we've just talked about going back in time, but to go into the future, find out technology, then come back to the present and use that technology to kind of take over. I think that's even scarier than going back trying to correct something and making a mistake.
Yeah. I love the different theories because when people talk about time travel, most of the ways that it goes are people talking about traveling to the past, kind of like what we're talking about, right? And there are a couple of different theories that I will go over of how this could be possible. So, like wormholes. You've heard of this concept, right? These are hypothetical passages that exist through space-time, which, according to Einstein, are one and the same, okay? That could create shortcuts for long journeys across the universe. And if they exist and could be stabilized, some theories suggest that they may allow for backward time travel. I want to say, though, that these are purely theoretical, okay? And they face very practical and scientific hurdles. The closest thing that I found to wormholes are actually black holes, okay? So something Yeah, what's really interesting about black holes, the gravitational pull towards the center of some of these supermassive black holes, right? Scientists have been able to observe that light will bend around a black hole. And as we understand, the faster we travel to the speed of light, that affects our perception of time passing. It slows down, right? So the theory is, if we could somehow travel into a black hole and survive, that they believe that a wormhole has an entrance and an exit. And because light is affected in a black hole, if you were to travel through it and you pop out the other side, you're probably traveling faster than the speed of light, and you're going to end up in a different part of the universe at a different time. You could go through a black hole, what feels like a second for you, could be tens of thousands, if not millions of years once you come out the other side, which I think is really, really interesting.
Very interesting.
There was kind of like a fan fiction conspiracy theory. There's nothing to purport this, but there was a cosmonaut, which was a Soviet-era astronaut that was sent into space, okay? This was before we landed on the moon, and they were just testing, can people get up there? I think his name was like Yuri or something like that. And unfortunately, the spacecraft that Yuri was on lost its ability to re-enter Earth's gravitational pull. He came out of the atmosphere and was basically launched into space. His last recorded message that he was able to send back to ground control in the Soviet Union was, "Tell my family I love them. Hopefully my sacrifice won't be in vain." And then he just went into space. okay? Obviously, space is a very large, very, very, very large area, okay? He more than likely just died in relative obscurity. But the interesting thought is that that spacecraft, if it hasn't been pulled into a planet or a moon and been crushed or pulled into a star and burned, there was this theory that Yuri's spacecraft entered into a black hole or will eventually. And if the wormhole doesn't completely destroy his spacecraft and he pops out, what if a small little spaceship from Earth is somewhere in the universe and another civilization finds it? And it may prove to them, hey, this is probably possible. And then it leads to time travel for another civilization somewhere else in the universe. I think that's a pretty cool idea.
I think so too.
Then there's the idea of cosmic strings. String theory, this is way above my pay grade and mental capacity to figure out how string theory works. That book I was telling you about with Stephen Hawking, he talks about string theory. To use this in the simplest terms possible, the idea is that the entire universe is comprised of these unbelievably, we can't even imagine how small these strings are. And they're vibrating at a certain frequency.
Right.
Right? And they kind of phase in and out of reality. If you believe in multiple universes, the way that Stephen Hawking does, these strings will vibrate back and forth in a weird way, right? The idea is that if we can somehow harness these vibrations and figure out a way to tune them in the right way, you could essentially make some physical matter blink from one point in time to the next, which is a weird concept to think about, but that's kind of the idea about string theory, right? Now, we have to talk about the paradoxes of these, right?
Like the twin paradox?
Well, yeah, there's the twin paradox, which is what we've already kind of seen with our experiment about Bob and Alice, but it uses the idea of twins that if, let's use me and Zach, for example, right? Let's say I'm on a spaceship that's traveling the speed of light, and then I come back to Earth. I think that I've been up there for like a day. I come back, and then instead of being 28, Zach is now 58, and I had no idea what happened. But there's another paradox that I'm sure you've probably heard of, the grandfather paradox.
Yep.
So the theory of this paradox states simply, if I have the ability to travel back in time, and I do, and then I kill my grandfather, would I cease to exist? Would I just fade into nothing? It's a crazy concept to think about. Because what makes it even weirder to think about is that if that was what I planned on doing to begin with, then I should never have existed in the first place. You know what I mean? I wouldn't have even been around to then do this paradox where I go back in time and kill my grandfather. It would have already have happened. Just, ugh.
Do you have a time machine that I can borrow?
To put a nice little bow on this, I liked purposely to end on the grandfather paradox because it kind of highlights how really impossible the whole concept of time travel actually kind of is. Currently. The idea is that there's a natural order to things. You're kind of talking about it with your faith, right? There's a natural order to the universe. And maybe there's some sort of correcting force, call it a deity, call it God, doesn't really matter, that would prevent us from being able to go back in time and cease our own existence, right?
Well, I mean, if we look at a lot of conspiracy theories like that we're a lab experiment, that aliens they're not going to allow us to do that.
Yeah, exactly.
You know,
There would be a hard code built into our simulation, if you want to call it, that wouldn't allow us to do that, right?
I think that time travel might be the single most destructive weapon, if it were weaponized,
Yeah.
in existence.
I will leave you with kind of a fun story.
Mm-hmm.
Have you heard?
I mean, you've brought us so far down right now into the dark black hole of reality
yeah.
that you need to bring me out of this, man.
I want you guys to do your own sort of like research on this. The man from Taured. Have you heard of him?
Yes.
So it's an urban legend, and you know how we love urban legends on this podcast. Allegedly, there was a man who appeared at Tokyo's Haneda Airport in 1954. This man claimed to be from a country called Tared, which, as many of our astute listeners with access to Google will find out, that's not a real place. It's never existed. All right?
On this earth, it's not existed.
Exactly. But supposedly, he had a passport and documents from this non-existent country. And after being detained, he just vanished without a trace, which I think is such a cool story to think about.
It is.
Maybe his vibrational frequency allowed him to phase into our universe. And of course, he's confused. He's like, no, yeah, I come from Torrid. Have you guys not heard of this? You know, it's located near Madagascar. How do you guys? And then, for whatever reason, his vibrational sequence kicked back in, and he went back to where he was supposed to be from.
I think that all of this reminds me of like multiverse, multi-dimensional planes of existence and things like that. So I'm not going to say that's not possible. I'm not going to say that story is kind of uplifting. I'm not going to say that's not possible, that somebody shifted from one plane of existence to another, even if it was accidental.
Mm-hmm.
Okay? I think that that's quite possible if we go on that kind of theory or that conspiracy theory. So I'm not going to say that's not possible. I'm going to say I'm skeptically optimistic that wherever he came from, if he came from somewhere, wherever he came from was just a different reality than ours, and that where he came from was just a normal place.
Could have been.
And he came here, and this was abnormal for him.
I just got one more quick thing. This is hilarious. For any of our listeners who ever find themselves in a court case about insider trading, you can use the excuse that this gentleman named Andrew Carlson used. So he was allegedly arrested in 2003 for insider trading. Insider trading, for those who don't know, I'll give you a quick summary. It's essentially that, let's say I sell sandwiches, okay? And Ed is the largest sandwich producer in the nation, if not the world. He tells me, hey, Jacob, I am going to expand my business and I've made the most delicious sandwich ever. You should invest in my company. I buy stock in Ed's company at $10 a share. He releases this incredible sandwich. The stocks shoot up to $100 a share, making me a multimillionaire. That's illegal. You can't do that, okay? So Carlson apparently made an initial investment of $800 that quickly turned into $350 million. When questioned about insider trading, Carlson claimed to be a time traveler from the year 2256 who knew which stocks would rise. This was originally reported in a tabloid, and its credibility is kind of sketchy at best. But that was a hilarious example of somebody being like, no, I wasn't insider trading. I'm just from the future. I guess people would also like to do that for sports betting too, probably.
Mm-hmm.
Anyway, I just thought I would tell you those two cool stories.
Well, that's interesting. I do want to say the content. This is a disclaimer. The content that Jacob just told us about using that as a legal defense. The content is provided for entertainment purposes only and is not intended as legal advice because, Jacob, we're going to wind up in court. So without any further ado, I guess, any last words?
Please, any time travelers that are listening to this episode, come say hi to me. I'll keep it a secret.
I'll add on to that. Any time travelers in the comments on our social media, tell us that you were here.
Yeah.
We would love to hear your stories from the future or the past.
Yeah. I don't mind.
Now, family, you adults have a few chores to do. Go on over to ravensvail.com and see about doing your chores on social media. Follow us on all the social media platforms that we've made available just for you folks. Like, listen, subscribe, and follow wherever you listen to podcasts. And if you don't mind, please give Jacob a good rating and a kind comment. You can find the Ravens Vail Cauldron podcast on your favorite podcast platforms. And if you haven't already, just search for the Ravens Vail Cauldron podcast. Again, make sure that you hit the follow button to stay up to date with our latest episodes.
Oh, and tell your friends about us, won't you?
So until next time, family, see you soon.
The Ravens Vail Cauldron is a production of Small Raven Media. Today's episode was hosted by Ed Bolden-Greer with co-host Jacob A. Garner. Audio engineering and sound design by Nick Devan at Nicky D Sound. Copyrighted 2024, Small Raven Media. All rights reserved.